So I was doing this huge leap, and the leg's supposed to be taking the air, and it's supposed to beat twice with the legs, and you land in this position. Just as I was taking off, I slipped. My leg has already taken me airborne, and I lost my balance. My back falling from this height crashed onto the stage. Stars flew, and I didn't know where I was. Eventually, they asked me, do you want to go on, or do you want to quit? Do you want to stop? I said, I want to go on. I refused to quit. So I barely finished the 3 rounds of competition. That was only the beginning of the first round. And when I went back to America, the doctor said, one of the best neurosurgeons said, your dance career is finished. If you want to ever walk normally again, you can't practice at all. So I was put in bed for 3 months, laying there contemplating what was I going to do with my life. I was completely cut off from my beloved parents, my brothers. I was not allowed to go home. I was totally alone in the world. And dance was all I knew. So that was another moment I had to dig down deep and ask myself why and am I capable of and how can I get out of that dilemma. Eventually, I got myself up to try to discover every single muscle in my body, to try to secure, to support those bulging discs in my lower back. And I then went on to become one of the top 10 dancers, went on for another 13 years of dancing. Wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It was damn hard. It was so hard. So eventually, I went on to dance for 20 years of my entire dancing career on the most prestigious stages in front of the president, prime ministers, royalties. But one thing in my heart I knew was missing. I was suffering a great deal emotionally because I want to see my parents. I want to help them. I can't help them. I can't even write a letter home. So when I was dancing, years later, I was dancing the Prince in Swan Lake in Washington, D.C. A couple of days before the opening night, Barbara Bush, who was still on the board of the ballet, invited my director and I to the White House for tea. It was during that meeting she learned about my difficulties with China. I didn't realize on the opening night of my performance, they invited the Chinese ambassador and court attaché to see me dance. During the intermission, Vice President Bush personally asked the Chinese guests if they could help me. I didn't believe they would. How could they possibly help somebody like me? But to my utter surprise, my parents eventually received the Chinese government's permission to leave China to visit me in America. What an impossible dream came true for us. As I said to you earlier, they couldn't read or write, never left their hometown before, never went in a car, on a train, on an airplane before, never went into a theater before, never seen their son dance before, yet they're going to experience all of these things in that one single trip. The night they were to arrive was the huge performance in Houston. I was dancing the Prince that night. Some wonderful friends went to the airport to meet them so I could concentrate on my show. On the schedule, they have enough time to get to the theater before the performance started so we could have a proper reunion. But their plane was terribly delayed. When my friends realized they're going to miss my performance, they desperately called up everybody for help, including the Houston police. The police car eventually came with sirens, escorted them through the heavy traffic, rushed them to the theater. Maybe they could catch part of my performance. When my director, Ben Stevenson, realized they were running late, they're going to miss at least the first half of the performance, he decided to wait for them. So he delayed the performance, patiently waited for them to arrive. Eventually, when my parents were finally led into the theater, the entire audience burst into applause for them. There are a lot of teary eyes in the audience that night. No doubt the worst of them all was my poor mother. With tears flooding down her face, I truly didn't think she saw a single thing I did on stage that night. So from that moment onwards, all the nightmares were lifted away from me. I then eventually danced my final 3.5 years as a principal dancer at the Australian Ballet, all because when I was dancing in London, met this beautiful ballerina. Her name was Mary McKendry. Eventually, we were paired together as partners. and we worked like magic on stage. Eventually, we fell in love in real life. And she was the reason I went to Australia. When I moved there in 1995, I was already age 35. Most classical ballet dancers, they finish their career between 30 to 35. So I knew my days were limited. So I wanted to plan ahead. So I eventually thought to myself, would I possibly capable of doing more than just dance? Because the education for dance was the only thing I know since age 11. Didn't know anything else. So it was so scary, that thought. But again, I went to why am I capable and how.